I am so excited about our next podcast guest, Dr. Eric Recker. This is probably one of the most inspiring episodes or interviews that we've done recently, particularly if you're a physician or working in healthcare and you're feeling a little bit burned out and you're looking for some inspiration. You're looking for some encouragement and you're looking for some practical hands-on, tips or pro tips from other physicians that have been there before. And I'm encouraged by what I hear from Dr. Recker. I'm encouraged by his story. I'm encouraged from the life lessons that he's learned to overcome what most of you are facing. And you have and you wear an impossible burden on your shoulders every single day to be everything for everybody. And as we say around here a lot, and we're going to emphasize in this episode, hey, you know what? You don't have to be the best doctor in the world anymore. You just have to be the best doctor for the world and for your patients and for your local community. And that, hey, you've done tough stuff before and you're going to do tough stuff again. I know you can get this. So let's lean in, listen, and get connected with Dr. Eric Recker. Nothing in this podcast is intended to render legal, financial, medical, or other professional information. Because the details of your situation are fact-dependent, we highly encourage you to find a recommended individual that you can trust to give you the expertise that you need related to your situation. Well, good morning or good evening, Docpreneur Nation. You're listening to Concierge Medicine Today's Docpreneur Leadership Podcast. And today our guest is a medical professional, an entrepreneur, an author, and a regular speaker. And he is Eric Recker. And today we're going to talk about three topics. We're going to talk about overcoming fear as a physician. We're going to talk about a little bit about burnout and stepping forward in a bold way, and also some strategies from climbing, hiking, and climbing that mountain of life, but strategies from Kilimanjaro so you can reach your peak in life and leadership as a physician. Eric, thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Eric, before we begin, well, first of all, I want to be absolutely always respectful. Do you want me to call you Dr. Recker before we jump into your background? Because I'm happy to do that. I didn't see it right in front of me, but want to make sure I'm respectful.
No, I appreciate that. Eric is great. My patients call me Dr. Eric. You can call me whatever you want. Eric's great.
All right. Well, we will put the links in case you don't know or you already are familiar with Eric. You can go to ERIC Recker, RECKER. We'll put the link in the show notes to his website, his social media channels, but it's ericrecker.com and ERICRECKER. So, Eric, tell us a little bit about how you got into healthcare. Was it in the family business? Was your dad this and your mom was this, grandfathers? Or was it just something that you were like, I'm really interested in health and this is a direction and path I want to take for my life?
So interesting story. I ended up going to University of Iowa, which is the same place that both of my parents had gone to. I went there wanting to be a physical therapist. And we all had that. Everyone who's in healthcare had that Chem 1 class that they had to take. Makes me a little nauseous just thinking about it. But it was such a weed out class. And I was struggling early on trying to get used to school. And I went to an all-day symposium about physical therapy. And I asked a question, can I get into physical therapy with a C in general chem? It was just a anonymous question. So right before lunch, they did a couple questions. They read it, and the guy about fell off the podium. Well, in the physical therapy program, we allow this many students, and no, you cannot get in with a C. And it was I just had this feeling, it's time to leave the room. So I left the room. Ironically, the symposium was at the dental school. And so, because physical therapy didn't have a big enough auditorium, the program didn't have a big enough auditorium for it. So I wandered around the dental school a little bit. My father was a dentist, but I never once looked at doing what he did. And I spent the rest of the day kind of soul searching and walking around and, is there some irony of why this is at the dental school? What am I supposed to learn from this? And I thought, I need to have a good conversation with my dad about what he does, why he likes to do it, And if that's maybe a route I want to go. I looked back, he was able to be at some of my sports events when I was growing up. He had some flexibility in his schedule. He had some things that really appealed to me. And most importantly, he loved the long-term relationships that he had with his patients.
Mhm.
So it was at that point that I said, all right, I'm actually going to shadow him and watch him a couple days and see what he does. And from there, I decided, I think this is the career path I want to go down.
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. We don't often, I'm a parent and, I got three kids and one is a senior in high school and, the youngest is 10 and, it would be, you always want to steer your kids in, of course, the right direction, but never, rarely are we ever given and have the, good relationship with our kids, even though we strive to have that as parents, where, your son or your daughter says, I'd like to know more about what you do. I mean, occasionally you get the one-off question because it's an assignment in school, but for you to actually take it upon yourself to, to kind of shadow him and learn from him, that's the sign of a good dad, it sounds like. So, and you were early on evaluating work-life balance. And that is such an important gift or an really trained skill that you have to always improve on in life, even when you're in your mid 40s and 60s. It's like, how do I balance work and life? And you're always constantly learning. So glad to hear that. That's encouraging. So tell us a little bit about what led you to where you are today.
Yeah, so it's so funny that you bring up work-life balance because I sucked at it. I really did. I had some words that were spoken over me on the playground when I was really young. I was told I wasn't good enough,
Mhm.
told I couldn't play recess kickball. And I was just told it over and over and over again. So I believed I wasn't good enough. And so in the midst of that, nothing was ever good enough for me. So when I was in college, I wasn't ever happy with my grades or my performance. I kept working harder. In dental school, it wasn't enough that I was in the top 15 in my class. I had to be in the top 10. I got done with school and everything was competitive. Other people weren't being competitive as much towards me, but I was so competitive with myself. So I started running, ran marathons, started doing triathlons all the way through Ironman. And really, what happened with this is I created someone who was never satisfied, always driving for the more, 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 trying to prove that I was good enough. And it's no surprise that that ended up in burnout. So for me, it ended up in, started out with tightness in my chest, heart palpitations. But as I ignored it and felt like this is just what happens to entrepreneurs, this is just what happens to people who are in healthcare, eventually it led to panic attacks. Uh, Panic attacks on the floor in the server room in my practice when the server had crashed. 5 hygienists were waiting for me to do my check, and I was 30 minutes behind. And oh, by the way, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. And
Oof.
so, and I learned some lessons during that time. I was overcommitted. I had way too much on my plate, and I sure as heck was not taking care of myself. So I learned some of those things, but I just kept pushing forward. And eventually it got to the point where I nearly sold my dental practice and walked away. After we came back from COVID, we all got our worlds rocked during COVID. And I had a chance to step back just a little bit and develop some better habits to help me actually have some time to think and ponder what I wanted next. And I was so burned out that I felt like the only answer was to escape, to walk away. So I had a deal, a verbal deal in place with my associate who worked for me at the time to buy my practice. And I told him within a year I would be walking away from dentistry for good.
Wow.
A month before we finalized everything, on the way to work on a Monday morning, he was in a horrific car accident.
Oh.
And it was amazing that he survived. But as he survived, I all of a sudden got crazy busier than I'd ever been because he was an associate in my practice and he couldn't practice. So I had to step back and say, what do I really want? And I realized in that moment that all I was trying to do is run away from my burnout. That burnout was going to follow me into whatever I did next. And I didn't have a freaking clue what I was going to do next, but the burnout was going to follow me. So I had to step back and decide what I wanted to do. So that's a whole podcast in and of itself. But what I eventually got to the point is I needed some help. Being alone at the top with a team of 18 and trying to manage myself, manage my family, do all the extra things that I did and run a practice was just too much. And I also realized that I had been through some big stuff in my life, and I wanted to be able to share that with other people and help them on their journey. So currently, I've sold half of my dental practice to a partner. And part of that agreement was within a few months after my partner started working, I would step back to 3 clinical days a week and then spend the rest of my time coaching other people on their journey, speaking to groups about burnout and climbing mountains and lessons we can learn and how to better our lives. And then also writing books. So that's where I'm at right now, seeing patients 3 days a week, doing everything else 2 or 3 or 4 days a week, depending on how much I have going on. But that's the place I'm at right now. So I still get to have the relationships with my patients and my team. I'm not alone at the top in leadership, and I get to help other people on their journeys.
There are a number of left and right rabbit trails I want to go and step onto from what you just said. Um, and I don't know which one to choose, so I'm just going to choose one. And I remember it was a course evaluation testimonial from a physician, and he said, Michael, you ask all the pesky questions that we doctors would want to ask. So I'm going to ask some pesky questions, so to speak, because I think we need to pull on those threads a little bit, specifically for those physicians listening who have come to terms that my kids are Star Wars fans and Mandalorian fans. So if you've watched it, this is the way. And if it seems as though there is a collective group, and it's fairly large, of physicians out there who have just accepted burnout as status quo. This is normal. This is part of the process. This is my life. And unfortunately, this is going to be my life for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And I just have to man up, woman up, and accept it and not complain. And as you know, that can lead to several, health problems, can lead to suicide, can lead to a whole bunch of other things, even leaving the practice of medicine. I had one doctor years ago, he said, if I don't move into something like concierge medicine, I'm going to quit and release my medical degree. I'm going to go become an operations person of my wife's florist business. And I was like, wow, what a dramatic turn. So what do you have to say to the larger group of physicians and healthcare professionals out there who have just said, I accept it. This is just how it is, and I'm sad, and it makes me sad. What do you have to say to those folks out there?
I've been there. I have been there, and it's a scary place to be. When you get yourself up in the mirror, you've already had to have courage to get yourself up and even face that mirror. When you look in that mirror and you think this is as good as life is going to get, it's a sad, hopeless feeling. It really can be, and I've been there. But there is hope, and it does not have to be that way. It really doesn't. I hung out in that space for so long because I was convinced of that same thing. This is as good as it gets. It just sucks. I got to suck it up. I got to get through my career. Hope there's a little bit of money left at the end, and hopefully I don't die in the process of some stress related whatever. The thing I love to do, I like to say I'm in the business of hope. I want to help people discover hope. I like to say faith, hope, and belief that good days are ahead. Because if we don't have that, life gets dark really quick. And then we don't have much to give our patients. We don't have much to give our families. We don't have much to give ourselves. Well, we were talking about getting a vacation, but I mean, raise your hand to yourself if you've felt this, right? We coast into fumes on a 1 week vacation. We need it so freaking bad. Takes us 5 days to get uncorked. We get one decent day, and then we start worrying about going home.
Yeah. And then it's 9 o'clock, like you said, and then 9 o'clock a.m. on your first day back, and you've only been there an hour and a half. And next thing you know, you can't even remember your vacation.
Yep, I've been there. I've been there. But it all starts with raising our hands, the courage to raise our hands, and exactly what we talked about before the episode. At some point, change happens when the pain of staying the same is less than the pain of change. Change is scary. There's fear behind it. But what if it's worse if we just stay right where we are? Because at some point we're going to wake up and it's going to be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years down the road, and we didn't do anything. And we're going to feel tremendous regret that we didn't take a first step. We didn't reach out to a coach. We didn't raise our hand and say, hey, I'm overwhelmed. I'm burned out. I'm torched. I'm fatigued. Wherever you are on that scale, so much of it is just being willing to raise your hand and say, I need some help.
Well, now there's in looking towards the future of, well, where and how do I find hope? I hear you. You know, I think one of the sweetest and most precious emails I got a couple of years ago was, you know, we had had a conversation with another physician guest just like this, and and she wrote an email and she said at about minute number 6, I was in tears. And you know speak to the physician who's listening now, who's like, yeah, I'm at the end of my rope. I mean, I'm just, where do I find hope? How do I find hope? Sometimes that's in hobbies, sometimes it's in faith traditions, sometimes it's in keeping yourself busy, but there's, as you said, there's a way to do that in a healthy way. But then there's also at that same time wrestling with regret or wrestle with guilt. And finding hope can, you have a fork in the road, like, okay, there's the hope, I can see it out the window, but first I have to deal with these one of two beasts, regret or guilt. How do you wrestle with those?
Yeah, first of all, you are not alone. Your problems are unique to you in a sense, but there's really nothing new under the sun. There isn't. What you're going through is a version of what lots of other people have gone through. There's nuances and there's all of that. I thought I was the only person who was facing what I was facing to the degree that I was. I was not. And the reality is we oftentimes need an ally to walk alongside us and help us to see that there might be another way. It's the favorite thing I get to do is I get to walk alongside somebody, even somebody who's starved of hope. They believe that there's no reason for hope left anymore. And we take a step back and define what it is that you really want. What do you really want life to look like? And then we start to devise some experiments around that. What are some things we can do to put some feelers out there and see, oh, maybe I can try this, maybe I can try this. And we can start to develop some systems and habits to make life not seem so dark. And I'm not saying that you're going to reach out to me and 2 weeks later, everything's going to be sunshine and unicorns and all of that stuff. That's not how it works. It took a long time to get where you're at today. But today is the day that we move forward. There
Yeah.
might be all kinds of garbage in the past, and there's mental health professionals that can do a great job with helping some of that. I'm the type of person who wants to meet you right where you are and help move forward. I have patients all the time that sit in our chair that haven't been in for 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years. They never intended to do that. And there's shame around that. But I tell them I'm so proud of them for their courage to take that first step in, to say, you know what, to heck with shame and embarrassment and all of that. And I say, we're not dwelling on the past, no matter what condition your teeth are in, we're going to move forward. So no matter what condition you are in, no matter how broken your family systems are, your dysfunctional your work is, whatever it looks like, we're going to try to step forward from that. Every mountain that's ever been climbed, someone had to take the first step. And it might seem like it's really, really, really tall, and it always will be if we just stare at it.
Well, that is powerful. And, for those who are thinking like, well, I can't leave my patients and, I can't say no. And, I mean, coming from the world of concierge medicine, I do a lot of work each and every day on the topic of physician burnout and finding entrepreneurial ways to be creative and follow those physician entrepreneurial tendencies, so to speak. And from a patient perspective, patients are burned out as well. And we talk a lot about patient burnout in the last couple of years. And, your patients are going to be okay. I'm from my side of the exam room, I'm not a physician, but I am a patient. So I do know what it's like to sit on the other side of the exam room from a burned out, frustrated, would rather be anywhere but here physician. We will go like a teenager in search of an iPhone. We'll go in anywhere and everywhere we can that we will feel cared for. And, that should provide a little bit of a crack in the door to say, okay, yeah, I get it. Patients are probably not happy with my care right now. And there are other providers in the area. I can help them find that. My staff can help them find those folks. But I just need a little sabbatical. I need some time for myself to heal and to be a better doctor for them in the future. And I say this a lot, and it has given us the word "for" is not this is not original. This came from my mentor Jeff Henderson, and he said, the word "for" means to be in favor of, and to be in favor of your patients, your local community that you had a long established business and practice in. Just take the weight of the world and your community, and you have to be all things for all people at all times that you're taught in medical school. Take that weight off of your shoulders for a moment and just think about like, hey, it's no longer about being the best doctor in the world anymore. That's what you were taught. That's fine. But at the same time, it's about being the best doctor for the world and for your patients and for your local community. And in what you said a moment ago, and you're welcome to riff on that a little bit, but the question I have for you is related to mental health. And sometimes that can, as a healthcare professional, you kind of fall into two camps of like, absolutely, that is amazing. I need to go. Yeah, and I'm going to go, or I'm already going. But then there's no, like, I'm not going to go do that. There's a little bit of an ego there of like, well, that's admitting that I have these problems, and I'm not going to do that because what would my colleagues, like I just can't. And like you said, took a while to get here, and it's going to take you a while through therapy and some mental health counseling. I mean, I'm in therapy as well, I admit it, I'm out there. And I wish it was a 4-week fix. I wish it was something that would heal itself eventually. But unfortunately, I've been wrestling with this, these things for over 20, 30 years. So riff on those. Not sure the question in there, but I'll let you riff on some of those ideas.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the mountain a little bit. And we just think it's too tall. I'm too far gone. I have too many things in my life. I just have to keep my head down and work. That's all I can do. I just get keep my head down and work. Maybe I have bills, maybe I have whatever. There's all kinds of garbage around it. But we have to give ourselves the gift of belief that it doesn't have to be this way.
Mhm.
It doesn't. There isn't a situation I've seen yet that there can't be a few tweaks to help get a little bit of hope. And the whole mental health thing, I'm praying for a day when we're just all okay with that.
Yeah.
I really am. Both of my kids have seen a therapist. My wife and I cried our eyes out in the car after we dropped them off, and we couldn't sit in the waiting room. We had to go out in the car and cry because we felt like they were the worst parents in the world. We shared it with a therapist who's a friend of ours. She said, I really hope you guys can get over that, because to me, I see that you're some of the best parents I know, because you want your kids to be the best they can be. And talking to me means that they have another ally to work with them. I've seen a therapist. My wife has seen a therapist. Um, I feel like I don't have to go as often because I have two really good friends who are therapists, and they always love to talk about this stuff. So we go down those rabbit holes all the time. Um, but just there's this weird pride that we have, and I hate it. The willingness to ask for help, the willingness to be able to be vulnerable and walk alongside other people. Uh, it can be super lonely to be a healthcare provider.
Mhm.
It really can be. You can be. I've even noticed this. Some people are scared to be your friend because they just, well, I mean, they're rich and they all this, and we can't have anything in common. But if you have a hard time with that, then man, a therapist or a coach or someone who can help walk alongside you, sometimes that's all the hope you really need, just to know that you're not alone.
And a lot of that, and a lot of what our discussion is has been kind of centering around that we haven't mentioned the word is mindset. Mindset is so important, and I know for so many physicians, we they've adopted unhealthy mindsets and so many good healthy mindsets. Around in particular, you know. Around health and wellness, that they're taking care of themselves, especially many of the female physicians, just incredibly healthy, much more so. I'd like to see more studies on male versus female physicians and how men are maybe not taking care of themselves as well as they need to, and what they can learn from the rising female tide that is moving into being a physician. But mindset plays such an important role. What are a couple of the healthy mindsets that you encourage physicians in this time?
Yeah, so one of them is just being in the present moment. It's probably the biggest thing for me. It's the win the now mindset. So I talk a lot about that. The now is the most important moment that we have. And I find that most people are either stuck in the past or worried about the future, or a combination of the two constantly. The whole, boy, I'm sitting here at the dinner table with my family, but I
Mhm.
haven't heard the last 15 minutes of conversation because I'm still stuck in whatever happened yesterday, or whoever's coming in tomorrow, or whatever, whatever, whatever. And we miss that moment that's guaranteed right in front of us. To me, there's not much that's more important than being in the present moment. So the first step with that is just being aware of, oh man, yeah, I'm not in the same place, mind and body. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about home. When I'm at home, I'm thinking about work. When I'm all of the stuff with that. And then looking for wins in the present moment. So when you're with a patient, I needed to break my day into smaller chunks, because I would come home at the end of the day. My wife would say, how was your day? And I'd say, oh, this happened. Oh, this thing happened. This bad thing happened. And I could reduce a whole day that often had lots of very positive elements to it into one crappy thing that happened.
Yeah.
So being in the present moment and looking for wins. So when I have a patient in my chair, what do wins look like? So a win looks like we have a good catch up conversation. We get through a procedure as painlessly as possible. Not everybody
Mhm.
likes to go to the dentist. Big shock, I know. But my patient feels seen, known, and heard.
Yeah.
Uh, so I'm always looking for those kind of wins and how I can get better with that. There's also times when we're going to take a loss. That bad thing is going to happen in the day. It's just going to happen. It's a long day. Something's going to go wrong. But instead of, oh, this happened to me, asking one question: what can I learn from that? And
Mhm.
so when we ask those kind of questions when tough things happen, and we're honest with ourselves about what we can learn, then we can turn those losses into wins. And it helps us get back into the present moment where the action's happening and where the good stuff is happening. So right now for our conversation, If I'm stuck in the 3 meetings that I have later today, if I'm worried about all of those, then I'm just given phoned in, non-heartfelt answers right now. But instead, I know that wins in this moment look like a great conversation between us, looks
Mhm.
like adding value for the listeners. Hopefully, it's providing hope for someone who's really struggling. Hopefully, a lot of people who are struggling, that we can provide hope for that. And then when I'm done with this, I'll be ready to go for my next meeting, and I'll be ready to be fully present in that. So I think that mindset of being in the present moment is one of the strongest ones that we can adopt.
Wow. Well, you are an author and you've written a book called That Damn Analogy. And I presume you spell the word damn, D-A-M. Am I correct in that?
You got it.
I
You got
figured I just didn't want anybody out there to be like, Michael, oh my goodness, what are you saying on there? This is not a family-friendly podcast anymore. Well, I want to talk about the book in just a moment, and maybe you can fold the book into this next, I would say there's a large number of yeah, but doctors out there. Yeah, I like what you're saying. I hear you, but it's the insurance company. It's the pre-authorizations. It's the amount of administrative burden that I have to deal with. It's the this, it's the that. It's everybody else's fault but mine. And I'm just here and stuck in the middle, and I want a permission slip to complain. And not only that, but everybody I talk to at medical conferences, I'm going to tell them that it's not their fault either. They're just the victim. Victim, 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 all over the place. And there's a large, unfortunate group of physicians out there who want to adopt that mindset, adopt that mentality. So, what do you have to say to those folks? Because that's unfortunately a superhighway to burnout as well. Or maybe it's just regret.
Hang out on just about any social media page and you will realize that misery loves company.
Yeah.
You know, the ones that get the responses, the ones that the algorithms like, are the ones that get people fired up. It's
Mhm.
just, you get clicks from that. So you post something really controversial, get everybody to stack on top of it. Everybody's elevated, more anxious, mad, but it brings people to the site.
Mhm. And you know
So
what? As a patient, we know those stuff. We know we can identify those ones pretty quickly, and we're like, okay, I do not need to be coming back here again. Just in case everybody thought you were hiding, we can identify those things. Sorry to interrupt.
no, no, perfect segue. So I always invite my audiences when I start a talk, because there's always going to be the folded arms people in the back. I was a folded arms person in the back. It's okay. But instead of entering into a conversation heck bent on how this is not going to work for me and I'm the exception, and dang it, I need to get told, I need to have my victim mentality. What if you said throughout this podcast, everything that we've talked about, what if you just asked this question: how could this work for me?
Mhm.
Because not necessarily all of it is going to work for you, but how could it work for me? You
Mhm.
know, some of these ideas you hear, you might hear a whole lecture. You're like, God, that doesn't work in my rural practice, and my patients are different, and blah, 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 blah. What's one thing I can take away from this that I can use to move forward?
Yeah.
And just have a little crack of an open mind, just a little bit. The permission to ask that question: how could this work for me? I think that's such a powerful question. I spoke to a group this last weekend, and the event planner reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's a bunch of people that are worried that they've heard about your presentation, and they're worried that they're gonna have to talk to each other a lot. Like, they're not looking forward to that." And I said, "Don't worry about that." I said, I have ways to encourage people to share and converse. Oh my goodness, I had to shut them down so I could get back talking. It was really
Mhm.
fun. They had a little bell up on there, and I asked permission if I could ring the bell. And so when it was time to get everybody back together, I'd ring the bell. And even a couple times I had to bang on the bell a couple times to get people dialed back in. But I think most of the people in there actually gave themselves permission for, how can I learn from Eric today? What of his story is going to resonate from me? And I talk a lot about climbing mountains and doing a bunch of stuff, and a bunch of the people in the room were in their 60s and 70s, even some in their 80s. And a couple of them are not going to climb mountains.
Yeah.
But what about the mountains that they have in their life that they need to face? So I think closed-mindedness, if you are bent on having a closed mind, your life isn't going to change much.
Yeah.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but if you aren't ever going to be open to change or the belief that something better could happen, 5 years from now, we're going to be having the same discussion and you're just going to be more grumpy.
Well, and that's encouragement too, as a physician listening, that if you are invited to speak somewhere, that you know, you you tell stories. You start with a story, you take a master class, like go become a better public speaker. Just because you're a physician and you see patients and you know the research and the data and the whatevers inside and out doesn't mean you're going to be an engaged public speaker. And this is as a marketing and communicator myself, and one of the reasons I love what I do is because I want to make sure that we're clearly communicating what the message is at that moment. And so often we've heard these improper, boring, unengaged speakers, and we're missing the opportunities, particularly in the medical and healthcare field, where we've listened to boring medical lectures, and it's hard to make statistics and research and new published, things. It's hard to make some of those things engaging, but there's always a way. And so I appreciate what you do. And I appreciate that you've written some books on what we've been talking about today. And the new book, our guest today is Eric Recker. You can go to the links in the show notes, but it's EricReckeR.com, EricRecker.com. Tell us a little bit about your new book, The Damn Analogy. That
Yeah,
damn
so
analogy.
I wanted to have a title that kind of would grab people's attention when they saw it on a shelf and just think, oh, what's this all about?
Mhm.
And it's interesting because there was some pushback on the title, like nobody's ever going to look at that. That's kind of a weird title and a weird cover. But the reality is, and the title came from, I live about a mile away from a dam. And so
Mm.
on Sunday mornings, a lot of times I would ride my bike across that dam. I would go for 25 or 30 miles in the morning on Sunday mornings, just kind of part of my week. And one day I rode across the dam, and we've all had those things where we don't necessarily hear audible words, but just right in our gut, we just sense something like a profound phrase or something that really just leaps off the page. So I heard "We Are the Dam," and I thought, oh man, we got together as a neighborhood the night before and played some cards and had a drink or two. Am I dehydrated this morning? Am I low blood sugar? What's going on? What's that all about? So I took some time that afternoon and really thought about it. And it took a couple of years for the concept to really fully bloom. But it's true. We are like a dam. So if you think about the components of a dam, we have the dam itself. Lake Red Rock is really close to my house. It's Iowa's biggest lake. And what it is just a big bank of dirt and then floodgates.
Mm.
So on one side is a huge lake, and on the other side is the continuation of the Des Moines River. And what happens is water pools up and then water is let through. It was built for flood control. And so, but there's side effects of great recreation, and there's a beach and there's a marina and there's this beautiful view of the water and all of these things. There's fishing down below the dam where the river comes out and the fish come through, and there's all kinds of things. So step back to that. How are we the dam? All we're really doing in our lives is controlling the flow of energy that goes through us. And this is not some woo-woo thing. It's really true if you think about it. So we are pretty good at getting the stuff done that we need to get done. Our outputs, the outflow, the river. We know what we need to get done, and we find a way to get that done at the expense of sleep, at the expense of our lunch hours, at the expense of getting home at a reasonable time. All of those things. We are pretty good at the outflow part. We're not so good at the inflow part. We're not so good at filling the lake back up. We don't do things that fill us back up for the purpose of having something to give. And
Mhm.
what we're really bad at doing is we lie to ourselves. So I like to talk when I do this talk. I started off and I say the first thing is, all right, I got a line on there. I got all the numbers 1 through 10. Empty is 1, full is 10. Empty is you are so drained, you can't hardly get out of bed. You have no energy, nothing left. Full is you're bouncing off the walls. You have so much energy, you have so much to give, you're completely full. Most people can't relate to a 10 in our world, especially with the responsibilities we have. But the problem is we lie to ourselves and we tell ourselves that we're a 7 or an 8. And we go through life as if we are a 7 or an 8. We keep pouring out. We serve on our committees. We treat our patients. We do all the things for our family. We do all that. We completely neglect sleep, good relationships, all of those kind of things. And so eventually what happens is we get really, really empty on the lakeside. And when we're empty on the lakeside, for boating, we might hit a snag. What does that look like in real life? We're going to make a terrible decision because we didn't think it through. Or we're so empty that we're going to start having a health consequence. We can only run empty for so long before our body breaks down and we're sick, or we have a heart problem, or we have a mental health problem. So I find so often what happens is we are overcommitted, which means we just have too much on our plate and we're not taking care of ourselves. And that was the equation as I look back forensically to the 3 significant seasons of burnout that I had in my life. That equation was there every single time. So we have to be aware of it. And the book is all about strategies for how can we figure out what we need and what we don't need for outflow. And
Wow.
then how can we take care of ourselves so that we have something in the tank to give to other people?
I like that. And it reminds me of a book that I send to doctors a lot. And I don't know, I I remember she and I are very good friends, and she's like, another book? You send me another book? I was like, I'm sorry. I know there's just so many good ones out there, and including yours, the new one, That Damn Analogy. I presume you can go to Amazon. Is it available on Amazon or just
There is.
ericrecker.com?
Yep, available on Amazon.
All right. So you go to That Damn Analogy, but we're moving into our lightning round of questions with Eric Recker. He is an author, is it, am I saying dentist, or you have another title you prefer on that one?
Dentist is accurate.
And entrepreneur. I love that. I love physician entrepreneurs. I love that you followed your entrepreneurial tendencies, so to speak. And you learn, dentists are so good at marketing. It's so much better at business than a lot of other types of physicians. Not to to say anything about that, but I mean, the truth is the truth. So but nonetheless, we're moving into our lightning round of questions for Eric. And you can be however fast or brief as you would like. But before we jump into my first lightning round of questions, I just want to emphasize what we've been talking about today. If you're a physician listening, and you do not need to feel guilt or shame for doing what you need to do to fill your lake or to fill your cup back up. Um, your problems are going to be there tomorrow. That's if you're a Yellowstone fan, you remember what the patriarch said. That's the thing about problems; they'll probably be here tomorrow too. And I want to talk real quick about. So this is part of the lightning round questions. Journaling. Was that part of your discovery? Is it part of your process, changing your mindset? What have others commented to you about that process? Because for me, hated journaling. I did not want to do a journal. In fact, the last time I did a journal, it was like seventh grade, and I made it 3 pages in, and I was like, well, that's that. Bought a nice journal, but never used it. And but I have started, and it has, fortunately or unfortunately, brings up emotions as you're writing them down, and but it has been unusually cathartic in my therapy that I've been going through personally to deal with some issues.
Yeah. Journaling is huge. So what's crazy is when my office closed for COVID, it was death by webinar if I chose.
Yep.
There was so much information coming at you. I had never been on a Zoom meeting before that. But it was just coming at us, coming at us, coming at us. Infection control, new practices, PPP loans, all of the stuff. And it was so overwhelming. And so day two, I just had this epiphany that I needed some quiet. I had never had a quiet practice in my life, never. And I was terrified of it, but I knew if I did not take some quiet and give my brain some time to idle, that I was probably gonna lose it during COVID. Because I'm, trying to support my team got furloughed, all the things that we had to do. It was nuts. And so I committed myself to 30 minutes of quiet a day, which is a ton. To go
Mhm.
from 0 to 30, that's ridiculous. But I'm an all in kind of person. So my wife was like, yeah, sounds about right.
And uninterrupted, that's the hardest part too.
It is. It is. Day one, I could have looked at it as a miserable failure. I closed my eyes and tried to be quiet. Head is spinning at about 600,000 RPM. It's just unbelievable how fast it's spinning. I'm like, okay, I got to be close. I looked at my watch. I was 46 seconds into being quiet.
Mm.
But I did a hugely important thing. I gave myself some grace. And I said, I'm going to get better each day at this. So I learned, set an alarm on my phone for 30 minutes. And my mentor said, Eric, don't judge yourself. Wherever your thoughts go, they go. When they're going too far, just recenter yourself. I would just remind myself, I am here, right now. I'd have to say it a ton of times, but I kept bringing myself back. And after about 3 or 4 days of doing this, my body craved it. I needed it so bad. And so I would have a journal right next to me. And if something really profound popped up, I would just write a couple notes about it and then go back to my quiet. And then afterwards, I'd try to have a little bit of time to go back and expand on those thoughts because I knew if some of those thoughts that were profound, I needed to do that. So journaling is huge for me. But one of the best uses of a journal, and I know a ton of people are going to say, can't do that, head spins too much.
Mhm.
My head spins as fast as anyone's. It does. It's just how I process things. So I've gotten really good at doing a brain dump. When my head is spinning too much, take 5 minutes, write down everything that's in my head with no judgment. Everything. Then I'll circle 3 things that I get to work on. And it is unbelievable. If I do that before I go to sleep, I am so much less likely to wake up with a spinning head.
Wow. Well, I don't know how I get on these rabbit trails with YouTube, but we all can go down deep holes. And I started when I was getting into therapy and journaling. I was like, well, how do you journal? Like this is I am this is new for me. And and then stumbled on this one interview, and it was the Tomo River notebook. And it's from Japan, and it has one of the softest, almost like rice paper. And it just, that to me helped me journal. I know that sounds so weird and funny, like you just pick any notebook. No, for me, I wanted something I would enjoy because I'm going to be spending an hour or 30 minutes a day doing this. So, I didn't want it to feel like I'm scratching just thoughts on a paper. And then I bought the smallest one so that I could do those brain dumps, so that it was just a little bit larger than a Post-it pad, and I keep it in my back pocket. And uh, I scribble down that brain dump or I scribble down, who do I need to send a thank you note to, or what was if I wake up in the middle of the night, this was also very helpful for me. My mentor told me this, and this is our next question for you, is the role of a mentor and what that has meant for you. Because my mentor said, hey, you know what? Look, if Coca-Cola and Home Depot and all these other brands and hospitals, they have board of advisors, you're an individual. You should have a board of advisors, so to speak, as well. And so that means mentors. It means maybe your spouse. And it doesn't necessarily only mean your spouse, because I think that there's value in outside perspectives. But for me, when I wake up in the middle of the night at 4 a.m., thinking my mind's going a million miles an hour, and I'm like, oh, great. All right, here we go. I won't get any sleep. It'll be 7 a.m. or 5:30 a.m. Before this ends, and then I'll be ready for sleep, but I have to get up for the day. Is I'll try and scribble down what is in my head for that moment into that. Now, that's not easy to do, and I'm not perfect at it in the middle of the night at 4 a.m. But I find that if I can put those pen to paper and get that out of my head, it has helped a little bit with some of my sleep. Now, again, that's not medical advice. That's just, some joker telling you what he does with journals. But what role has the power of a mentor, the words of a mentor played in yours? And how did you find them? Was it somebody you already knew? Was it somebody who sees your blind spots? Because you and I can go to people that will listen to our ideas, and we're going to go to the people who we kind of know that they're like, I know that they're going to be 80% on my side when I share this new idea, but that's why I'm going to them, because I need affirmation. I don't want somebody who's just going to come and poo-poo my idea, even though sometimes that might be some of the blind spots that we need to hear.
Yeah, so you're not the only joker who writes down stuff in the middle of the night. I have a piece of paper there, and I actually sleep with an eye mask on as well. Um, but my pen and my paper are right there. And so I can get my pen out without even pulling my eye mask, and I try to write on there. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I'm like, what the heck did I even write?
Hmm.
Got it out of my head.
Hmm.
And when I got it out of my head, and I knew something happens in the brain, I don't fully know what it is, but when you get it out of your head on a piece of paper, then you know you have it. You've saved it. It's almost like printing off an email. You can discard it, but you still have it if you need
Hmm.
to refer to it. So it's been a huge thing for me versus just laying in bed. But the mentor, I was highly encouraged to have a mentor, and so I just had a patient who what had been it just seemed like we would linger with our conversations a little bit longer. He's about 25 years older than me, and I started actually scheduling more time with him because I wanted to make sure we could talk. I eventually said, you know what, this is crazy. These little conversations, I'm always left wanting more. And I said, would you be willing to be a mentor for me? And he said, well, absolutely. And so once a month we get together for lunch, and it's amazing. He asks me tough questions. He keeps me accountable. He has taught me as much as any other human has. And we've been in a mentoring relationship I've known him for 20 years, and we've been in a mentor relationship for about 7 or 8 years. And we message a little bit in between our sessions, but I think having a mentor is priceless. So my board of directors is my mentor, my wife, and then I have four what I would call 2 a.m. friends.
Hmm.
And I really need all of them to do life well. Each one of them helps advise me in different parts of my life, but we weren't meant to do life by ourselves. We just
Hmm.
weren't. We are better together. We need those people in our lives.
Yeah. Wow. Well, our guest today has been Eric Recker. He's an author, a medical professional, an entrepreneur, a speaker. You can go to ericrecker.com. He's written a book called That Damn Analogy. You can go to ericrecker.com to pick up the book, or as well on Amazon. Our last question for you is related to gratitude. And I love the podcast. I love the interviews that I get to have here, as I'm sure, you get to meet new friends and commiserate with old ones as well throughout our each of what each and you and I do in our professions. And I equate it to we each get to push each other's boulder up the mountain for just a little bit, and then somebody else comes in and helps, leaves for a while, and then you're kind of left by yourself. But then and eventually somebody else comes in. But we all are pushing that boulder up a mountain, and so I appreciate you coming over to the mountain of ours over here in Georgia, and I'll come over to yours there in Iowa. But actually, I've been to Iowa. I've driven across there. There's no mountains over there, but we could find a
Oh,
few good hills. But the book, That Damn Analogy, you can go get it at ericrecker.com. Another book I recommend folks, especially if you struggle with schedule and time management, a good one to maybe pick up is At Your Best by Carrie Newhoff. And that kind of breaks a schedule or a day down into red, like a stoplight, red, green, yellow. And it helps identify what you're really energized to do is in your green zone. Yellow is like, I can phone it in. And red is just like, these activities do not give me life or sustenance. Do not find joy in them. But what book do you give away most besides your own? Because as a fellow author, I know that I probably give my book away more than I sell it. But what book do you recommend besides your own, That Damn Analogy? Do you encourage physicians maybe start with?
well, I'm a huge fan of James Clear's Atomic Habits. And I
Mm,
know it's a super common book and a lot of people really, really know about it, but life is systems and habits. It really is. And if we can get some good systems and habits in place, that is a good way to fill us up and give us purpose and direction.
mm, I like that. Well, our guest today has been Eric Recker. You can go to ERICRECKER, ericrecker.com. We'll put the links in the show notes. But Eric, thank you so much for your time today. I know that you're doing really important work, and thank you for sharing your story with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.